Who is in charge of Africa? For decades, people on the continent have been asking this question loudly at protests and in institutions of authority. For many, the response has always been the West. Former colonial masters write, Ibrahim Traore, the 35-year-old president of Burkina Faso, however, isn't buying it. He made the daring decision to go against the grain and establish the Treasury Deposit Bank, which is being hailed as a significant step toward real financial independence from Western rule. But is this the beginning of a new era or merely a new chapter in the tragically lengthy history of economic conflicts in Africa? Let's investigate. Is it Burkina Faso's path to financial independence, or is it just another means of enrichment for the wealthy? The 16 nations that make up West Africa are all currently experiencing new forms of colonial exploitation and tyranny. It's among the world's richest areas. Everything is found in West Africa. Despite all of these advantages, a large portion of our population still lacks access to a daily meal. Captain Ibrahim Traore reportedly said, and I quote, "Many people in our community lack access to education. They are unable to obtain accommodation. They are unable to obtain medical care. Why are we so impoverished although there is so much wealth around us? As our resources are no longer our own. Furthermore, our people do not profit from the exploitation of our resources." It's the most pressing question that everyone has and gets to the core of the problem. The establishment of the Treasury Deposit Bank appears to be a win for the Burkina Faso people. A means of removing foreign powers' hold on power and firmly transferring it to the country. However, the West advises against being overly enthused about patriotism. That is accurate too. Let's look for some rational justifications for why this choice is worthy of celebration. Who will gain from this action? A government-owned bank that is directly linked to the national treasury is an attractive concept, particularly for Burkina Faso, which has been economically constrained by colonial history. Under the direction of the Bank of France, the central bank of West African states has functioned as the de facto central bank for Burkina Faso and a number of other francophone nations for many years. Many people have been frustrated by this arrangement since they believe it to be a financial holdover from colonialism, keeping African countries financially dependent on their former oppressors. Traore is indicating a clear departure from this past with the creation of the Treasury Deposit Bank. Burkina Faso will no longer be forced to pass its financial transactions via a system under the control of outside parties. The bank's purpose is to oversee the nation's public finances, allowing it to invest in its own health, education, and infrastructure systems without having to rely on loans with conditions from Western organizations. This action is genuinely revolutionary. It's a proclamation of economic independence and a rejection of the financial institutions that have long kept Africa behind. Captain Ibrahim Traore, the head of Burkina Faso's armed forces, has inaugurated the country's first state-owned bank. On Friday, August 2nd, the bank, named the Treasury Deposit Bank, officially opened in Ouagadougou, the country's capital. According to Traore, the bank will be more accessible to the public and use a more suitable approach to project and program finance, which will support the nation's socio-economic development. The acting president encouraged the public and private sectors to utilize this bank in order to contribute to the joint development of an independent economy. Three main goals are the focus of the bank: finance infrastructure, meet the financial needs of small and medium-sized enterprises in the area, and aid in the expansion of Burkina Faso's growth sectors. However, this is the issue that critics are bringing up. Similar to riches, power tends to concentrate at the top. Although the establishment of a national bank may appear to be a win for the people, the truth is frequently significantly more nuanced. Who's to say that the Treasury Deposit Bank won't turn into just another instrument for the wealthy to profit themselves in a nation where corruption has always been rampant? It's something we've witnessed repeatedly. While the privileged get richer, the needy receive promises. Although Traore may sincerely want to see Burkina Faso emerge from poverty, sincerity is insufficient to alter a system that has been rigged for many years. But it's important to recognize this move's potential. The Treasury Deposit Bank might, in fact, function as a means of achieving true financial independence if properly run. The real test will be whether the bank can live up to its expectations and genuinely help the Burkina Faso people, or if it will instead act as another tool of tyranny, keeping the poor in their place while the rich get fat off the gains of independence. The issue now is whether Burkina Faso's audacious action can ignite an African financial revolution. Add your voice to the total liberation of Africa by dropping a comment in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more informative videos like this one. Now, let's move on. For those who have long yearned for a continent liberated from the economic restraints of Western dominance, it is an alluring notion. However, let's examine this in more detail before we pop the champagne corks. There is no denying that Traore took a risk when he decided to form the Treasury Deposit Bank, and some are already heralding it as the start of a new era for Africa. African countries have been made to play by rules that were drafted in Washington, Paris, and London for far too long. The conditions of economic participation have been set by the IMF, World Bank, and Bank of France, often at the expense of the very people they seem to be assisting. As a result, Africa has been unable to reach its full potential due to a vicious circle of debt, dependency, and hopelessness. This is the key, though. The Treasury Deposit Bank's establishment by Burkina Faso makes a strong message. It is a proclamation of independence and a rejection of the financial institutions that have long kept Africa behind. If Traore's risk proves to be successful, it may encourage other African leaders to follow suit. This goes beyond a single nation. It's about the continent as a whole deciding it's had enough and taking charge of its own fate. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, though. There are many challenges and hazards on the long and perilous path to financial independence. The forces against African financial sovereignty are strong and range from established elites who profit from the status quo to powerful foreign nations who have a stake in retaining their influence. However, this is a war that is worthwhile. Africa can no longer afford to play the role of pawn in the world economy. It needs to start acting like a player on its own. Yet, the West is stating that assistance from the West is required. It cannot just give up on the West. Is Burkina Faso attempting to bite off more than it can handle? Skeptics have been asking this topic ever since Traore revealed his intentions to create the Treasury Deposit Bank. And a good one at that. Undoubtedly, the concept of financial independence is alluring. Nevertheless, pursuing financial independence on your own carries a number of hazards that could prove to be more detrimental than beneficial. Economic instability is one of the main threats. Honestly, Burkina Faso isn't really a major player in the financial world. It is a tiny, landlocked nation with a shaky economy and few resources. Burkina Faso is effectively venturing into uncharted territory by seceding from the Central Bank of West African states and forming its central bank. Without the Central Bank of West African states and the CFA franc's safety net, the nation is susceptible to economic shocks that might have disastrous effects. And then there's the inflationary problem. A mismanaged Treasury Deposit Bank could result in uncontrollably high inflation, a situation that has occurred in other African nations seeking to demonstrate their economic autonomy. Zimbabwe serves as a warning in this sense. The nation's economy plunged into hyperinflation in the early 2000s. Once it stopped using the Zimbabwean currency, it began creating money to pay off its debts. The end effect was economic anarchy, with very high rate of inflation monthly. To be clear though, Traore is not Mugabe, and Burkina Faso is not Zimbabwe. While the similarities are noteworthy, they shouldn't be exaggerated. It is possible that the Treasury Deposit Bank will cause an inflationary spiral, if it begins issuing money carelessly. However, Traore appears to be aware of the risks. There's much reason to think he'll go cautiously. His goal for Burkina Faso is methodical, planned steps toward actual financial independence rather than a careless retreat. Political instability is another potential hazard. Traore's challenge to the current financial order is winning him adversaries both domestically and internationally. It's unlikely that the established elites who have profited from the current quo will give up their position of authority easily, and you never know what lengths they will go to in order to safeguard their interests. Furthermore, Western nations have a lengthy history of interfering in African affairs, so it's unlikely that they will stand by while one of their former colonies attempts to secede from their control. However, we must not undervalue Traore. He understands that he is engaged in a high-stakes game. However, he is also aware of the unsustainable nature of the current approach. Burkina Faso can no longer depend on a system intended to maintain it in a state of eternal slavery. Traore had the potential to pull off a coup that would alter Burkina Faso's history if he could successfully negotiate the risks and run the Treasury Deposit Bank. What happens if he doesn't succeed? The repercussions can be disastrous for the continent as a whole, as well as for his nation. Is Africa prepared to escape the economic shackles of the West at this point? It's an inquiry that crosses many boundaries, including Burkina Faso. Because the effects of Traore's experiment are being felt throughout the continent, even though it is taking place in a small landlocked nation. Africa has been ensnared in a cycle of reliance on Western institutions for economic development and financial support for many years. The former colonial powers, the World Bank, and the IMF have all influenced the economic climate of the continent, frequently at the expense of the very people they seem to be assisting. But Burkina Faso's decision to establish the Treasury Deposit Bank is a direct challenge to this status quo. It's a bold declaration that Africa is ready to take control of its destiny to break free from the economic chains that have held it back for so long. And if Traore's gamble pays off, it could inspire other African nations to follow suit. The result has been a continent that is rich in resources but poor in wealth. A continent that has been systematically exploited and kept in a state of perpetual underdevelopment. Don't romanticize this though. Getting to economic independence is not easy, and neither Burkina Faso nor any other African country can be certain that it will be accomplished. The enormous forces opposing African financial sovereignty are unlikely to be defeated without a battle. But here's the reality. You sometimes have to take chances in order to accomplish big things. The potential benefits are equally as great as the stakes. A new era of African economic independence may be ushered in if Burkina Faso succeeds in this. A time when African countries are free to follow their own paths and are not dependent on the West. What then is at risk for Africa? Everything. For this is about the future of the entire continent, not just Burkina Faso. The question is whether Africa will remain a pawn in the global economic game, or if it will eventually establish itself as a legitimate participant. Furthermore, what does financial independence imply to the local populace? Frequently overlooked in the expansive stories of politics and economics is one question. However, it's the most crucial query of all. Since Burkina Faso's experiment will ultimately be evaluated based on other factors than the Treasury Deposit Bank's balance sheets, nonetheless, by the lives of those for whom it is intended to be used. The average African has been excluded from the discussion for far too long. Elites who are not interested in or have little knowledge of the realities of life on the ground formulate economic policies in far-off capitals. As a result, a wealthy few now enjoys the fruits of economic progress on a continent where poverty, inequality, and corruption are the norm. However, what if that were to alter? What if Burkina Faso's financial independence experiment opens the door to a new economic development model that prioritizes the needs of common people? Though it's an inspiring idea, doing this would be an enormous task. Here, the West advises us to be sincere. the average African faces a stacked deck. Global capitalism has strong forces that will not easily relinquish their hold on power. Moreover, many African nations have firmly established political and economic institutions, and it won't be simple to fix. Here's the problem though. Anything can change. It has previously occurred, and it might do so again. Burkina Faso's experiment is a ray of hope, even though it may be a long shot. This is because if Traore succeeds in doing this and establishes a financial system that really benefits the populace, it has the potential to spark a revolution throughout the continent. What does this signify then for the typical African? It implies that there is a possibility that things could be different. A slight but real possibility. That a better system could take the place of the outdated ones that exploited people and created inequality. However, it also implies that the conflict is far from ended. Because although the creation of the Treasury Deposit Bank is a positive move, it's only the beginning. Creating a just and equitable economy is still the fundamental task that has to be done. What does that leave us with then? Unquestionably, Burkina Faso made a brave decision when it decided to establish the Treasury Deposit Bank, which might drastically alter the economic situation on the continent of Africa as a whole. But the stakes are really high, and it's also a risky move. As we've seen, there are big obstacles in the way, such political opposition, unstable economies, and the constant risk of Western meddling. However, there are also grounds for optimism, as this is fundamentally a story about more than banking or economics. It is a tale of the struggle for Africa's spirit. Regardless of the outcome of Traore's experiment, it serves as a potent reminder that Africa is an active participant in the global arena. People on this continent are prepared to take charge of their lives and fight for economic justice and the right to self-determination. Ultimately, whether Burkina Faso can achieve financial independence is not the actual question. Is Africa as a whole capable of meeting the challenge? Because there is a long and difficult journey ahead. But if the continent is to actually be freed from the shackles of its past, then this is a road that needs to be taken. And if Africa does rise, it will be a triumph of the human spirit as much as an economic one. A proclamation that the long abused and subjugated continent is now prepared to assume its rightful position on the international scene. And we'll all be grateful to President Ibrahim Traore for paving the path on that day. Do you believe that this choice will permanently alter Africa? Do you think change is possible? Will Traore commit the same errors as previous leaders did? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. We explore the rich history, culture, and the ongoing struggle for sovereignty in Africa. Join us in this important conversation by subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you'll not just stay informed, you're becoming part of a movement dedicated to reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's work together to spread knowledge and inspire change. Thanks for watching.